I am live. I'm reading out of Eyes of Horus. This is a book from the perspective of Ra'ab. He is the son of a priestess of Ra. This plays about 3,500 BC. It was written about 2,000 years after the Winged Pharaoh. This is a book about Joan Marshal Grants' far memories. And she is this young boy Ra'ab in this recollection of her story. It plays in ancient Egypt when there were still 18. I think they're called. He is heir to the nomarch of the Oryx, one of 18 prominent provinces in Egypt, and he has a pleasant childhood. And then he becomes aware of what goes on in the rest of Egypt. And I've written a little bit in the blurb of the playlist, and we are now on chapter 2. The story of OYAHBE. OYAHBE, OYAHBE. I always felt that even though my mother was dead, she was nearer to me, to my father, than either Kias or I. He was always kind and gentle to us, but even when he was trying his hardest to be understanding, we were still remote from his heart. It was Nekt Ra who told me about Mother. He used to call her OYAHBE, the moonflower, and this is her story as it was told to me by Nekt Ra when I was nearly 8 years old. I knew your mother since she was a child, for I was a priest of the temple of Ra in the town where her parents lived. It was a very small temple, little more than a sanctuary, set in a wide courtyard which also enclosed the priest's dwelling house. When I came into authority, I tried to follow the old traditions of my office, making the temple not only a place where tribute to the gods was received, but the house of a man to whom people would bring their sorrows. The one who had preceded me, though not a true priest, was a kindly man, and so I found no wall of suspicion or fear between me and those under my protection. Because I am not a seer, I could not know which of the children who came to me were set in the way of the priest, so I would not accept any of them as pupils, even when the parents brought them to me, hoping to gain favor with the gods by giving one of their family as a temple virgin. Though I had little experience of the temples of the new religion, I had seen enough to know that they were not training places of true priests. When your mother was brought to me, she was 12 years old, and I told her father that it were better she should continue to live in his house. Following in the way of life I tried to teach, then seeking to gain knowledge of the mysteries. I saw that both man and daughter were deeply distressed, and he said he wished to talk to me alone. I learned that both he and his wife were frightened of their daughter because she had strange visions. At first they thought she was deluded by demons. They had beaten and starved her, shut her in a dark room, and sewn magical amulets into her clothes to try to make her more like other children. When they saw that instead of being frightened of them, she was compassionate, their awe of her grew, until they thought she must be a child of the gods, sent to test her fidelity of their faith. Knowing that at my temple no more than the tribute of the 10th part was accepted, they tried to propitiate the gods whom they thought had sent this child to spy upon them, by taking gifts to the new temple 3 days' journey downriver. It was the girl herself who said she must live in my temple because it was her destiny to become a priest. Her parents rejoiced, thinking they need live no longer under this eye of the gods, but could rest content in the honor she would do to them. After hearing the father's story, I talked alone with the girl, and instead of child and priest, it was as though two carvers talked of their calling. She must have heard so many harsh answers when she spoke of her reality, yet she accepted my understanding without question, neither trying to heighten her story with mystery nor belittling its significance. In the past she must have been an initiate of Anubis, for in the memory of her dreams and of her far journey there was nothing tenuous. She talked of forgotten century, as though they were yesterday, making them live so that I could almost share her sight. She knew her parents were strangers to her, yet she had hoped that, in time, they would have accepted her as a friend. It must have been bitter for her to realize that the more she opened windows to reality, the more they shut themselves away from her. As she spoke, so greatly did I respect the authority in her voice, that I forgot she was a child, and I a man of 40 years. I belong here with you, Nectara. There is no work for me in my father's house, but here is much that I can do. In the days when all temples were the house of truth, there were many who could do much more than is within my little power, but now even I can help you. I know, for I dreamt it last night, that Yeki, the wife of a stone worker, will come to you today, carrying her sick baby for which she will beseech the pity of the gods. She will tell you that the child is growing thin, though it has no fever, and this is the cold weather, that it wails and is restless even when it sleeps. She will ask you to give her an amulet to protect it from the demons which she thinks are drawing on its strength. But she will not tell you that the child sickens, because her milk is starving it. Nor will she tell you that her breasts grow empty, because her husband ill-treats her. She told me only because she was asleep and not bound by a false loyalty to him. You must tell her to send her husband to you, and you, with words, must break the rod with which he beats her. We had been standing at the entrance to the sanctuary. Now she went down the steps into the brilliant sunlight of the courtyard. For a moment, OYAHBE, the priest, was again the child of 12 years old. You will let me stay here? Don't send me back to my father's house. I am so tired of always being a stranger. There was no longer any decision for me to take. You have no father save Ra. How could you go forth again from his house now that you have returned to it? A woman carrying a baby came through the gateway of the courtyard. Instinctively I knew she was the wife of the stone worker. OYAHBE had told me why she had come, and what it was I must tell her. My fellow priest smiled up at me. I'm so glad you believed me before she came. If truth is shining, it doesn't need to be proved. And I have prayed so hard to make people see my truth. OYAHBE's power increased as she grew older, and the door of my own memory, though never so vital as hers, swung wider on its hinges. When one had come for comfort, now did 10 come, though we would accomplish so little compared with what we wished to do. Once there would have been seers and healers, priests of Ma'at and of Ptah, and many pupils learning to become the wearers of the golden sandals by which men cross the causeway of the gods. The fame of OYAHBE came to the ears of those who saw in her a way of increasing their own power. A messenger from the high priest of the new temple of a city downriver came to summon us to audience with him. I answered that though our work was of small importance, we could not leave it to go on a journey. For more than a month no other message came, and we began to think they had forgotten to disturb our peace. But they sent another priest to take my place, and he told me I must take OYAHBE with me when I took up the office he had vacated. OYAHBE wanted us to ignore the command, saying, "The stranger priest can live in the sanctuary, and we will find somewhere else to live. The people will come to us there, for surely we are nearer the gods than it is a statue." I had to answer, "The power of these priests is not our power. It is the flail of the Pharaoh. If we disobey the order, soldiers will come to punish those who follow us. They who love us most will suffer most. Would you have them prove their loyalty with death?" Seeing my distress, she tried to comfort me. For 6 years we have found peace. Surely we have also found a strength that will sustain us. The town sorrowed at our going, and many of our people followed us a long way on the road to the north, beseeching us not to abandon them. Sorry. I will not describe the temple to you, Ra-up, for when you are older, you can see it or others like it. In the setting of stones on each other, or the spacing of columns, there is little to show whether a building is to the glory of Ra, or furthest the dark dominion of Set. I had the memories of my own youth to forewarn me of that temple, and of the priest I should find there, but so familiar had I become with the old teaching, through the recordings of OYAHBE, that I was not fully prepared for their tawdry spirit. Their rituals were rich in pageantry, and the offering vessels of precious metals, yet the seers were men who wore the ephod only as a sign of office and possessed no more than ordinary sight. And if those who went to the healers found better health for their going, it was because the illness had been a product of their own thoughts, and not due to a lack of the life of Ptah. Among the looking girls there were a few who had kept a trace of the ancient faculty, and so could tell what was happening at a distant place. But because they were afraid of the priestess and authority over them, they used to invent some incident to satisfy her rather than admit they had seen nothing. Each time they thus betrayed their power, a little more of it was lost to them. When it was decided they had become useless, they were driven from the temple to wander as outcasts from village to village. Many were the devices they employed to try to gain credence for the visions they claimed. On every third day, petitioners might enter any of the 3 outer courts. The looking girls were not strictly segregated, though they might not speak to anyone who did not belong to the temple. They would find an excuse. I lost my place here. They would find an excuse to pass through one of the most crowded courts, hoping to hear of something to lend colour to the stories they were driven to invent. It might be that a man grumbled at his harvest and said a kinsman in another nome suffered worse than he, or a woman might speak of her sister who had taken the fever which raged in a distant town. The girl who overheard such things was fortunate, for she could make it seem as though she had seen them in her looking bowl. It was among these girls that OYAHBE had lived. Had it not been for her, I should have refused to stay there. But as I thought that helping her was more important than anything else, I played my part in rituals whose meaning had been distorted or forgotten. Some of the priests were men of good heart, trying to do the best that was within their narrow compass. Others were less than ordinary men. They were cold, neither lit by the flame of the spirit, nor warmed by the embers of humanity. They intoned ritual prayers as a singer might follow the words of a song in an unknown language. They were celibate both in flesh and spirit, having renounced the love of women and being unable to attain the love of Ra. Cut off from the streams of all affection, they resembled men only as dead trees, still holding something of the likeness of those in which the sap still rises. At first OYAHBE tried to teach the other girls, but because her powers were genuine, their awe soon turned into jealousy. And jealousy grew from fear to hatred. Though she followed Anubis, and so was not a rival to the looking girls, they knew she could see through the veil of their deceits. They tried to increase her loneliness, turning away when she spoke to them, and running from the pool when she went there to bathe. When she realized that her powers were being used to increase the awe in which ignorant people held fool priests, or that drew forth their gold more easily than the overseer's flail, she presented to have lost her sleep memory. For a while they gave her only sufficient food to keep her alive, saying that fasting sharpened magical faculties. I think they may have brought other pains to her, though she would not admit this even to me. It was a year before they turned her from the temple, and because I followed her, I also became an outcast. By my shaven head, all who saw me knew that I had been a priest, and because I had only a loincloth instead of a white robe bordered with purple, they knew I had been degraded from my office. OYAHBE had to wear the tunic which marked her as a woman driven from a temple, for she had no other, and in the minds of the people a temple outcast is lower than she who hires her body to a foreigner. Often people threw filth at us as we passed, and women by a well would upset the full water jars rather than that we should drink from it. So that OYAHBE should not starve, I was driven to steal. I would leave her in some field near a village and then go back to snatch some onions or lettuce from the gardens of people who had refused us charity. I became a liar as well as a thief, for I told her I had met someone who had given them to us out of kindliness. After 5 days we came to the oryx, your father's gnome, and there we found that though people stared at us with curiosity, they showed no hostility. When we begged for food it was given, though without the customary greeting. Right, I finished this first part of chapter 2 here, and I hope you have a lovely Tuesday.